Hi, folks. Thanks for stopping by. Welcome to the second episode of I Like Big Boats and I Cannot Lie, the weekly ordeal where I talk about my favorite thing, submarines. I hope you're having a lovely day, and I hope last week went quite well for you. There's a brand new week ahead of us, and it's looking quite nautical. In times like these, we must always look for a little self-care, rest, and relaxation. Let's start by taking stock of our week and taking stock of our bodies and thanking our bodies for bearing us through what has been stress and uncertainty and joy and triumph and sadness and grief. There are challenges awaiting us throughout the rest of this week, but they are simply challenges, and we can overcome whatever we have to. Unfortunately, we don't really have a choice. So, let's bear through it together, okay? I hope this can at least offer you some boring blah 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 to put you to sleep. This week begins on the 22nd and extends to the 28th. We'll start with the launching of the USS Patrick Henry, SSBN 599, a George Washington-class nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine named after the founding father. Her keel was laid by electric boat in Groton, Connecticut in 1958, and she was launched the 22nd of September in 1959 by Mrs. Betty Arends, wife of Illinois Republican Congressman Leslie C. Arends. Like all ballistic missile submarines, Patrick Henry was manned by two crews, blue and gold. This is to maximize the amount of time they can operate, as their range is limited only by their food supply. In their case, each crew consisted of 12 officers and 100 enlisted. George Washington-class subs were 381 feet in length, powered by an S-5W reactor, and could reach speeds of over 25 knots submerged. The real speeds are closely guarded information, and trust me, I do not have any interest in looking deeper for them. That is classified stuff, and I don't care. Their armament consisted of 16 Polaris missiles and 6 torpedo tubes. Patrick Henry had an interesting career, which I'll talk more about in the future. If you're interested in what happened to her post-shakedown, I highly recommend looking her up. On September 23, 1918, Mrs. Erie A. Eklund sponsored the launching of the USS R-22. Built by Lake Torpedo Boat Company in Bridgeport, Connecticut, R-22, along with the rest of the R-class submarines, served as coastal and harbor defense boats. Ship's complement was 29 officers and sailors occupying a 175-foot vessel that could reach a test depth of 200 feet at a speed of 11 knots submerged, using the power of two 500-horsepower diesel engines and 2 electric motors. September 23, 1943, sees the keel laying of the USS Brill, SS-330. Brill was a 311-foot Vallejo-class submarine named for a European flatfish. She was laid down by the Electric Boat Company in Groton, Connecticut. Brill was commissioned late in World War II and decommissioned shortly after, ending up transferred to Turkey in May of 1948. 1 year later, USS Boarfish, SS-327, another Vallejo submarine, was commissioned, with Commander Royce L. Gross in command. They commenced a shakedown, or sea trial, off the coast of New England, then departed New London in October of 1944 to sail for Panama for intense training. From there, she transited the Panama Canal and sailed to Pearl Harbor. On December 24th, she left, took on supplies at Saipan, and embarked on her first war patrol. A third Vallejo class, the USS Char, SS-328, was commissioned on the same day as Boarfish. Her keel had also been laid by electric boat in Groton, and so on the 5th of November 1944, she left Naval Sub Base New London bound for Pearl Harbor. By December 30th, she was sailing her maiden war patrol. Of her 3 total war patrols, only the second was designated successful, so she received 1 battle star. The Vallejo submarine was propulsed by 4 General Motors diesel engines driving electrical generators, along with 2 126-cell Sargo batteries. They had 2 propellers and could reach a depth of 400 feet at a speed of around 20 knots surface. On the 24th of September 1918, the USS H-5 SS-148 was launched. This boat is quite interesting. It and 5 of its sister ships were originally ordered by the Imperial Russian Navy in 1915 and built at the Puget Sound Navy Yard in Bremerton, Washington. However, before they could be delivered to the Russians, the order was held up pending the outcome of the Russian Revolution of 1917. They ended up being stored at the construction yard in Bremerton before being purchased by the U.S. Navy, who then officially commissioned them as H-4 through H-9 in 1918. The 24th of September also involves the decommissioning, this time of another Vallejo-class boat, USS Cusk, SS-348. In June of 1969, the Secretary of Defense, Melvin Laird, ordered 100 of the Navy's oldest ships decommissioned, so Cusk sailed to Hunters Point Naval Shipyard in San Francisco, California for her decommissioning and simultaneous striking from the Naval Register. In 1972, she was sold for scrap, ending a long and storied career. Next we get to talk about the Turtle. No, not the original submarine. I'm talking about the Deep Submergence Vehicle, DSV-3, a crewed deep ocean research submersible owned by the Navy. Much like many boats in the fleet, she was designed by the Electric Boat Division of General Dynamics in Groton, Connecticut. From what I understand about the Turtle and the other DSVs, their existence was a replacement for the bathyscaphe. They're used for exploration and research. Turtle is a sister ship to the much more well-known Alvin. She could dive to over 10,000 feet, maintain a speed of 2 knots, and survive 72 hours with 3 crew, a pilot and 2 observers. She may have only been for research, but she was owned by the Navy, so she goes on a list. Turtle was named after Turtletown, a community in Polk County, Tennessee. Spent her career working with Submarine Development Group 1 in San Diego, California, but was retired from active service on the 1st of October, 1997. Moving on to the 25th of September, we have 3 commissionings: USS N-1, SS-53, USS N-2, SS-54, and USS N-3, SS-55, were built by Seattle Construction and Dry Dock Company in 1915. All 3 were commissioned on the 25th in 1917, with Lieutenants George A. Trevor, Hugh C. Fraser, and William R. Monroe in command, respectively. These 3 N-class boats were designed by Electric Boat to slightly different specifications, so they're sometimes considered a separate class. They were 147 feet long, with a crew of 2 officers and 23 enlisted, and could dive up to 200 feet. While submerged, each propeller was driven by a 280 horsepower electric motor that could propel them at 11 knots. 8 years later, in 1925, the USS S-51 SS-162 sank in a collision accident. The submarine was training off the coast of Block Island when she was rammed by the merchant steamer City of Rome. Sadly, only 3 sailors were able to abandon ship before she sank. S-51 was salvaged in 1926 by a team led by Lieutenant Commander Edward Ellsberg, assisted by Lieutenant Henry Hartley. She was sold for scrap on the 23rd of June, but her bell was saved and taken to the Submarine Force Library and Museum in Groton, Connecticut. The 25th of September also saw the keel laying of USS Sunfish, SS-281. In 1941, Sunfish, the first ship of the fleet to be named for the ocean sunfish or mola mola, was laid by what was, at the time, Mare Island Navy Yard in Vallejo, California. Mare Island is no longer a naval base. The facility was decommissioned in March of 1996. In her time, Sunfish went on 11 war patrols from 1942 until 1945. Each of these patrols lasted about 75 days. For these patrols, she received 9 battle stars. Lastly, for the 25th, we move on to the USS R-9 SS-86, which was decommissioned in Portsmouth, New Hampshire in 1945. She was officially struck from the Naval Vessel Register in October of 1945 and scrapped in February of 1946. The only entry I have for the 26th is the USS Bass, SS-164. Bass was laid down in October of 1921 at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in Kittery, Maine. She was originally launched 27 December 1924 as V2, sponsored by Mrs. Douglas E. Dismukes, and commissioned on the 26th in 1925. It wasn't until March of 1931 that she gained the name Bass, and her hull classification symbol was changed. Barracuda-class subs, or V-boats, were quite large and had powerful engines. They were designed to reach speeds of 21 knots with their gigantic diesel engines, but the first 3 of the class could only reach speeds of around 18 knots. It doesn't seem like Barracuda or her sisters, Bass and Bonita, saw much action, even after being converted to cargo submarines in the 1940s. Moving on to the 27th, 1917 sees the launching of USS O3, SS-64, one of 16 O-class submarines built during World War I. O3 was built by Four River Shipbuilding Company of Quincy, Massachusetts, starting December of 1916. The O-class submarines were 172 feet long, with a beam or maximum width of 18 feet. They were powered by diesel engines and electric motors. It would be some decades before Hyman G. Rickover and nuclear power hit the scene. O3 joined the Atlantic Coastal Patrol from Cape Cod to Key West. In 1943, the keel was laid for the USS Scabbardfish, SS-397, by the Portsmouth Navy Yard in Kittery, Maine. She was a Vallejo-class submarine, the only ship of the Navy to be named for the Scabbardfish, which personally I've never even heard of. Scabbardfish went on 5 war patrols, received 5 battle stars, and a Korean service medal before being decommissioned the 27th of November, 1953, at Mare Island. From there, she was purchased by the Greek Navy in 1976 and utilized for quite a few more years. I feel like we've been talking quite a bit about Vallejo subs in this episode. Likely they were all commissioned and decommissioned around the same time. 3 years later, in 1946, the R-20 SS-97 was decommissioned following a career that began with a keel laying on 4 June 1917 by Union Iron Works of San Francisco, California. She spent her last few years in Key West, Florida, to serve as a training ship before being sold for scrap in March of 1946 to Macy O. Scott of Miami, Florida. Lastly is the 28th of September. In 1916, the USS L-7 SS-46 was launched by its builder, Craig Shipbuilding of Long Beach, California. She was sponsored by Sarah Fogarty, wife of naval constructor William B. Fogarty, the superintending constructor. And for our very last entry, the launching of the USS Mackerel, SS-204. Mackerel was laid the 6th of October 1939 at the Electric Boat Company, once again, Groton, Connecticut. She was the lead ship of her class, the first to be named for the Mackerel. She and her semi-sister Marlin, which was designed by the Portsmouth Navy Yard, were prototypes designed to replace the S-class subs. Mackerel was launched the 28th of September 1940, sponsored by Miss Cora Furlong, wife of Rear Admiral William R. Furlong, Chief of the Bureau of Ordnance. That's it for this week,